Okay, thank you, Ivan. This was truly inspiring, and to really think about the different themes that we have under the Brain Initiative, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail. And certainly the artistic brain will have a specific slot during the day where there's a comprehensive program for folks to understand really where this is coming from. Let me transition over to our next set of talks, and we will kick off this part of the program first with Hal Stern, Vice Provost for Academic Planning. Hal.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks to Promote and Ivan for their remarks, which I thought were great and set a great tone for the day. I'm going to be brief for a couple of reasons. Those who know me know I generally like to be brief when I speak. More importantly, this morning, there's a group of 40-ish students across campus waiting for me to fill their UCI brains with knowledge. I have a class that's at 9:30, so I'll be brief and I will run out, but I will be back this afternoon, so I look forward to meeting with you and learning with you later in the day. I'm the Vice Provost for Academic Planning. A brief word about that job. It has a very easy description. I do whatever the provost tells me to do, so that's easy. Specific things that are in my purview in academic planning are when the UCI rolls out new schools, as we are doing in population and public health and pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. That is done through our office and through the wonderful staff that work there. Accreditation efforts run through my office. We consult with the provost or provide advice to the provost on issues in budget, enrollment, across the board. But the reason I'm here today is to support the Brain Initiative. We run through our office a program of academic initiatives, and so there are periodic calls every year, every couple of years, for ideas from the faculty to come up. So these are not top-down ideas, but faculty-generated ideas for interdisciplinary collaboration to link units across campus, and you've already heard a few times about how this one brings together the arts, computation, the life sciences. So it certainly fits the bill. The academic initiatives really run the scope. In the past, we've covered things like data science, water UCI, bringing together all those interested in water issues. Our current initiatives include one in educational research, one on the microbiome, one on infectious diseases, one on applied digital health, and the one that we're here today to launch and to speak about, UCI Brain. So the brain is obviously a critical issue, kind of I won't say the final frontier, we always find another, but a key frontier in front of us to try and understand and promote, and Ivan both mentioned some of the key, some nice information about that. When we set up an initiative like UCI Brain, we usually work with the director on setting a set of goals that we hope can be achieved. And in the case of UCI Brain, the goals are to set up some resources to facilitate brain research on our campus. And Mike and his team have done that. You heard Promote also talk about the efforts his office has made, the Vice Chancellor for Research, in terms of the facilities to generate data, to analyze data, to carry out experiments, and so forth. So that's an important part of what we do. We look for the initiatives to foster collaborations, both research and curricular. And so the Brain Initiative is doing a lot in that dimension. And today they have brought together a wide range of campus experts and people from outside. I'm looking forward, especially this evening, to the fireside chat of a bunch of leaders. I look forward to that, among other things. But so the initiative has done these things. They've created a website so that brain science researchers can find each other, not always as easy as it might seem on a campus with 1,200 plus faculty and thousands of students. So we're excited about all these things. On the curricular side, we have a number of programs on campus, and Mike is in conversations with his colleagues about building up a neuroscience graduate program that would bring those groups together. In the future, the Brain Initiative looks forward to pilot grants, so to provide seed funding for projects on campus that might help grow and increase our efforts in brain science. So from the Provost's office, from the Vice Provost for Academic Planning, we're extremely enthusiastic about UCI Brain and the things it has achieved and the things it will achieve in the time that it runs. I do want to close with a quote that I found. I was just trying to find something interesting. I came across something I had not heard before, but I thought it was really well said, very brief. The quote is from a scientist named Emerson Pugh, who is a computing person, and he wrote, "If the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't." And I thought it appropriate today because the people that Mike has invited to speak are evidence both that our brain is not simple because they are very complex and very intelligent and deep thinkers. And they also give us some hope, though we may never completely understand it, that we will make great progress in understanding the brain, hopefully curing or delaying disease, enhancing learning, and health and wellness. So with that, I will turn it back to Mike and the other speakers. As I said, I will run out, but I look forward to speaking with you in the remainder of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hal, especially for the introduction also to the Academic Initiatives Program. I think that there's a lot of excitement about the current initiatives, the past initiatives, and hopefully the future initiatives also that his office will try to support. Up next, I'd like to introduce Professor Gillian Hayes, Vice Provost for Graduate Education and Dean of the Graduate Division. Gillian.
Thank you, Mike. It's very exciting to be here with all of you today because I just spent 2 days with the other University of California graduate deans. And what I can tell you is on all of their campuses, this excitement about interdisciplinary research, about team science, and in fact, actually about neuroscience and brain-related initiatives is really very universal right now at the University of California. So I was so pleased to be able to tell them that this was launching today and that we too are part of this. I want to give a little bit of history in thinking about graduate education in response to this initiative. So in 2014, the Council of Grad Schools, which represents a few hundred graduate schools from 14 different countries, came together and wrote a joint statement committing to interdisciplinary grad education. And that's really exciting for where science is going. Now, I also want to tell you that UCI has been leading the way in this since pretty much our founding, several decades ago. We have schools like social ecology, biological sciences that really redefined the way that we think about these disciplines in a truly interdisciplinary way. I come from the Department of Informatics, which is a made-up word that no one knows that covers a whole bunch of different disciplines. We have Dan Stokel's here, Judy and Gary Olson, these real experts in team science and interdisciplinarity. So it's great to see that in UCI, and I think these academic initiatives, particularly the BRAIN initiative, are some shining examples of this kind of work. I also want to tell you that just graduate division as a whole, we are very committed to the idea of interdisciplinary education, to being able to build the true leaders of the future and of tomorrow. And neuroscience is a really good example of a place in which this kind of interdisciplinarity is key. So I do want to read you a small portion of the CGS statement on interdisciplinarity from 5 years ago. They said, many stakeholders stand to gain from an increased commitment to interdisciplinarity, including university administrators, academic staff, students, and faculty, as well as regions, nations, and societies at large. Documenting the impact of interdisciplinary research and programs is important for accountability to these stakeholders, as well as for facilitating assessment and improvement of any offerings. And this is the key part for me of what they said. Interdisciplinarity is not, however, an end in and of itself. Interdisciplinarity in graduate education and research must answer specific identifiable needs. And to me, there is no better shining example of that than neuroscience and the UCI Brain Initiative. We are tackling truly some of the world's most pressing problems through this exciting approach. So I just want to highlight that, and in particular highlight the Interdisciplinary Neuroscience Gateway Program, which has been a real shining example of being able to do this campus-wide for many years. When I first took on this job, I was sort of asking, what are the different PhD programs? What's going on? What do I not know from my little world in where I had been before? And the INP always came up as an example of a program that was creating some of the best scientists we have. I also started to get the joke that we don't have one neuroscience program, we have 6 neuroscience PhD programs, so there's also that. Really quickly, I just want to tell you where grad education on this campus is going in general, because it's rare that I get this many excited, committed people listening to me. So I do want to let you know, we hit a record number of applicants this year, over 20,000 PhD applicants, which is amazing. We can do better. UCLA hit 30,000, so, we're looking to grow by about 600 PhD students and MFA students on this campus by 2023. So that's about a 20% growth. And we're going to do that with the same high quality students that we have now. Some of that's going to come from new programs in new schools. Hal mentioned we have a bunch of new schools coming online, which is exciting. Some of that's going to come from existing programs. Some of that's going to come from growth in interdisciplinary initiatives like this one. It's expensive to bring 600 new PhD and MFA students to this campus, so we're looking to raise about $30 to $50 million to support that. That's going to come in a bunch of places. I was just with the president. She affirmed that the regents are pumped for bringing on more PhD students UC-wide. The chancellor and the provost here are very committed to doing this on our campus, so some of it will come from those kinds of resources. Some of it's going to come from exciting new grants. We can't all write $15 million neuroscience grants, but maybe some of you can. Some of that's going to come from training grants. I'm very excited to announce that in the next few weeks we will be hiring a full-time training grant support person to sit in grad division to complete all of those delightful tables that you like to do so much. Thank you. And we're also going to be raising money from private donors. So if any of you want to get your wallet out, we do want to make sure that people know all endowed PhD fellowships are going to get a one-to-one match from the campus through my office for the first 10 years of them. So that works out to about a 50% additional ROI for your donors. So we really look forward to bringing in all the support that we need. But back to the brain launch. So, again, team science, I firmly believe, is where it's at and where we're going, and that means we need to teach our graduate students to do that. It's really exciting to work with this initiative and work with the INP and other folks to figure out what that's going to look like. I do truly believe that's sort of what we call a unique selling proposition to our graduate students, to our faculty, to our donors, to our scientific agencies. And I just want you to all know that you have my support and that we will also come asking you for things. So particularly graduate students, as you get things published, as you speak places, as you do exciting things, tell us about it so we can highlight you. We just want to show off how wonderful our students and our postdocs really are. So thank you for having me, Mike, and good luck with this wonderful thing. Like Pramod and Hal before me, I am going to sneak out immediately after these remarks, but enjoy this wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. It's also very exciting to hear about what the future of graduate education on this campus will look like, and we're just delighted for Gillian to play this new role. Up next, I'd like to introduce a colleague, a friend, someone who I've known for close to 15 years now, and she has really been a source of inspiration for not just for me, but for many of us in the field. Dr. Caroline Montojo, the Director for Brain Initiatives at the Kavli Foundation, and I'm actually going to pull up her slides while we ask Caroline to come on down. Caroline. And I've got it right here. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Mike. It is very exciting for me to be here for a few different reasons. First, I'll mention Mike has already introduced me as the Director of Brain Initiatives at the Kavli Foundation, where I've been for about 4.5 years now. I wear a couple of hats. Another hat that I'm bringing today to speak on is that of spokesperson for the International Brain Initiative. So there are many reasons why I am excited to be here today. One of them is that as part of the International Brain Initiative, we've been collaborating very closely with many of your scientists here at UCI, including Mike, Yassa, Sunil Gandhi, as well as David Keeter, on one of the earliest working groups of the International Brain Initiative, which I'll speak upon later. Another reason I'm excited is because I've been following the development of the UCI Brain Initiative. Mike has told me about this for over a year now, how it's been in the concept phase and the development phase, and it's been so exciting to learn about the cross-cutting nature of this initiative and how it is really helping to pioneer where neuroscience is going and how team science has been evolving over the past decade. And finally, the other reason I am so excited to be here is because Mike has asked me to share a bit about the Kavli Foundation's role in the U.S. Brain Initiative as well as in the International Brain Initiative. And so I find that very appropriate. I understand the history of UCI is that there is a long-standing history of neuroscience here with the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior, having been established in 1964, which is quite a feat. And so I think it's very appropriate that the UCI Brain launch is happening here now. So to provide an overview of my talk, I will start off by sharing a little bit about what the Kavli Foundation does, who we are, our flagship program, but also about our role in what we call catalyzing and enabling. And I'll unpack that a little bit more to let you know what we mean by that. And then I'm going to transition into the International Brain Initiative. I think both the US Brain Initiative and the International Brain Initiative have a lot of relevant connections to what's happening here at UC Irvine. And so for those who are not familiar with the Kavli Foundation, our mission is to advance science for the benefit of humanity. We also have another half of our mission, which many people don't know about because it's just starting to emerge and build up now, which is to help increase public understanding of science. So this relates to the public engagement piece, which I also understand is a very important pillar of the strategy of the UCI Brain Initiative. The Kavli Foundation provides support for science around the world. We are an intrinsically international foundation. We have our flagship program, which is the Kavli Institutes, of which we have 20 of them around the world, 2 in theoretical physics, 6 in astrophysics, 5 in nanoscience, and 7 in neuroscience. In fact, 3 of our neuroscience institutes were launched in response to the US Brain Initiative. This was part of our support when President Obama made his announcement at the White House. The other half of our science programs, the other way that the foundation tries to support science is by what we call catalyzing and enabling. This is a very exciting aspect of the foundation, which I've been very deeply involved in over the time period that I've been there. And what this entails is that this allows us to interact very closely with the scientific community, scientists like yourselves, to be a listening ear to understand what are the trends, the patterns, the needs, the challenges that are emerging from the scientific community. This is also wonderful for me as well because I'm trained as a neuroscientist. And so being able to hear from neuroscientists directly in the community about some of these overarching needs is very, very fulfilling and very exciting. So, as you see here, there are many steps that are involved when you go from an idea to a scientific discovery. And one of the things that the Vice Chancellor mentioned this morning in his remarks is the importance of reaching for the moon, having a moonshot. We encourage scientists to think about moonshots and to really reach far, to think about what the field can accomplish. And so to do this, to help bring these ideas to discovery stages, we work very closely with funders coming from multiple different areas. So funders from government, federal funding agency, you see here the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, you see federal funding agencies like DOE, NIH, NSF, many of these agencies to which you apply for funding. There are also others in the scientific enterprise that are very relevant to this path. These include private foundations like ourselves, and there are many others like the Simons Foundations, Paul G. Allen Foundation, and then there's industry and universities like UC Irvine. What the Kavli Foundation tries to do is we try to help to catalyze these ideas. Mostly through our meetings program, we convene, we bring scientists together to understand what their needs are. If it happens to be the case that an idea has a lot of resonance with the broader community, and there's a lot of backing behind it, what we then do is we try to bring all of the relevant stakeholders into the room and have a dialogue about how this could actually happen. And so one thing that I'm going to share is walk you through a story of how we help to bring this catalyzing and enabling approach to the development of the US Brain Initiative. So this story starts off all the way back in September 2011. It's a couple years before the Brain Initiative was developed. And so what we did back in 2011 was we brought together Kavli Institute scientists at our nanoscience as well as neuroscience institutes, as well as other scientists from the community together at the Kavli Royal Society Center outside of London. There were many eminent scientists here, including people like George Church, Rafa Yuste, Paul Livasato, Michael Ruckus at Caltech, many different scientists who discussed what are opportunities at the interface of nanoscience and neuroscience. It was a very vigorous discussion. There was a proposal, why don't we try and map all the neurons in the brain? Why don't we create a brain activity map? There was a lot of vigorous pushback on that idea, too ambitious, why are we doing it, what's the point? But what ended up happening after that meeting is this group of scientists wrote a white paper called the Brain Activity Map, and that was the start of further dialogue that took place over the course of 18 months. So after that first meeting, we continued to convene further meetings in collaboration with the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, as well as with federal funding agencies like NIH and NSF and DARPA. We also did this in collaboration with our scientific societies, of which many we support. One of them is the Society for Neuroscience, and one of those meetings was held there. And after about 18 months of multiple convenings, in April 2013, the Brain Initiative, the US Brain Initiative, was announced by President Obama at the White House, as the Vice Chancellor had mentioned this morning. It was a very exciting moment, and one of the things that President Obama had mentioned during this announcement was that this was going to be a public-private partnership. Now, what does that mean? It means that this is an initiative that will bring together the work and the support and the mechanisms of different federal funding agencies, as well as folks from the private sector. So private foundations, universities, industry. Seems quite ambitious. How do you even do this? And this is one of the things I'm also going to mention later on in my remarks as well, of the importance of bringing these multiple groups together. These groups include universities as well, which is why this UCI Brain Initiative is quite important, because you'll see that there are a few different universities that have started to provide support in a brain initiative approach as well. So, building off of the Vice Chancellor's comments this morning, after the Brain Initiative was announced, there was a committee that was put together, led by Corey Bargman, who at the time was at Rockefeller University, as well as Bill Newsom, who's at Stanford. And they convened a group of experts to chart the roadmap for the US Brain Initiative moving forward. You can download this roadmap online. This is the Brain 2025 report. One of the key things that they mentioned here is that the first 5 years of the initiative would be focused on technology development. And then the second 5 years would emphasize discovery-driven science, building on the tools and technology that were developed and enabled by the first phase of the initiative. The hope, I should also say, is that the technology development is not going to stop in the second phase, but that it will continue to flourish as well. Now we find ourselves entering the second phase of the U.S. Brain Initiative. The Vice Chancellor had remarked that he was at SFN, where Walter Koroshetz gave some remarks on the status of the U.S. Brain Initiative and where it's heading. So another thing that you can take a look at as well that I think will be important as you chart the roadmap for the UCI Brain Initiative is a report that was just accepted by Francis Collins on October 21st, 2019, so just about exactly a month ago. It's called Brain 2.0, From Cells to Circuits Toward Cures. The NIH, and I should also mention that this represents the NIH perspective of the Brain Initiative, a very large perspective of the Brain Initiative, but as I had also said, there are many different partners that support the U.S. Brain Initiative. So in this roadmap, you'll see what the evaluation has been of the first phase of the Brain Initiative, and also charting where it can go. What are areas that could be further improved? What are areas that have been bottlenecks in the first phase of the Brain Initiative? I think that this will be very important because there's still a very long future for the Brain Initiative, and also robust funding for the Brain Initiative moving forward. So thinking about the trajectory and where these challenges are and opportunities are around neuroscience is going to be very important. And you can go to that website there to take a look at this 2.0 roadmap. So as I said, there's a long future ahead for the Brain Initiative, not necessarily in time because we're entering now the second phase of the Brain Initiative, but certainly in terms of funding. So this shows the approximate Brain Initiative federal funding year by year since 2014. And what you can see is that across the different federal funding agencies, there has been an increase in the amount of funding allocated to the Brain Initiative. This chart, by the way, doesn't include the private funding allocations to the Brain Initiative. And again, going into the NIH perspective and where they're at, one of the important things to keep in mind is that the projected total funding from NIH for the Brain Initiative is $4.9 billion, and so far through 2018, about $950 million has been spent, which means this is about only less than 20% of the total. So there's still a very bright future ahead in the next few years of the Brain Initiative. So I think that this provides a lot of opportunity to the scientific community to continue to innovate and shoot for these moonshots. Now, while the Brain Initiative has been enjoying fantastic success in terms of bipartisan support for funding, one of the roles of the foundation is that we try to listen very closely to challenges or gaps that might be emerging that might make the impact of the Brain Initiative more challenged. And so one of the things that we heard not long after the Brain Initiative was announced and after the funding opportunities started coming out is that several scientists approached us and said, well, it's such a distributed initiative. It's distributed across federal funding agencies, it's distributed across private foundations and industry. How do we go about participating? How do we go about looking for opportunities for funding here? It was a extremely valid concern. And so what we did is we got together with the other partners in the Brain Initiative across the public and private sectors and said, what can we do to help improve this experience for scientists? Right now, it's everywhere. They need a one-stop shop to be able to access this information. And so back in 2013, there were only a few supporters of the U.S. Brain Initiative. Over the following years, we noticed there was an increase, including organizations coming from industry, state, university settings. 2015, even more. And it was at this phase that we said, we need to better coordinate this. We need to provide some kind of glue to help all of these different organizations to stay coordinated and work together, and also come out with clearer messages and clearer funding opportunities to the scientific community. And so this is when we decided that we were going to establish the Brain Initiative Alliance. This started with some founding members from the private and public funding side, and since then we have participants coming from multiple different sectors. I think that this will be an important area for the UCI Brain Initiative to continue to interact and stay engaged in order to stay coordinated with all of the other Brain Initiative efforts that are happening around the country. And there are funding opportunities available on this website, and there will continue to be. This is a compilation of the funding opportunities coming from the multiple funding agencies. We're on calls every month to make sure that we're constantly updating this and keeping it relevant. Also reflects the private funding opportunities side. And you can visit the website for the Brain Initiative Alliance right up there. We also have events that happen at major conferences like FENS and SFN, so you can also get to know who's involved in the Brain Initiative. I realize that sometimes from the funding perspective, it's hard to know who's behind the wall, but there's really a group of people who are very, very invested in making sure that this is useful and can work for the scientific community. All right, and now I'm going to go into the International Brain Initiative. This International Brain Initiative work was a natural extension of our catalytic and enabling support for the U.S. Brain Initiative. We are an international foundation, as I had mentioned before, and so this was a really natural activity for us to support. Where this came out of was a few years after the U.S. Brain Initiative was announced, we were starting to hear from many in the scientific community that there are several large-scale, nationally sponsored brain initiatives that are emerging around the world. The Vice Chancellor this morning referred to the Human Brain Project, which experienced a lot of challenges in its early stages. They had to go through almost an entire rebirth of their initiative, and so are now on a track of much different structure, much different organizational and governance structure, and have been emerging from that initial misstep over the past few years. But in addition to the U.S. Brain Initiative, as well as the Human Brain Project, there was also the Japan Brain Minds initiative that was launched in 2014, and there have been several other large-scale initiatives coming in other countries throughout the world, including Australia, Korea, China, and Canada. And in fact, we're learning about new initiatives that are launching since that time period. And so with this, we were hearing from many in the community that it was going to be very important to help to better coordinate across these initiatives to better maximize their potential for impact. And so what I have here is a quote that came from a declaration of intent that was made in December 2017. This was where several of the Brain Initiative leaders said, we need to make a public declaration that we are committed to working with each other and better coordinating across our efforts. So what they had said in the Declaration of Intent that was made in Canberra, Australia, was that the global brain initiatives recognize that they are engaged in an effort so large and complex that even with the unprecedented efforts and resources from public and private sectors, no single initiative will be able to tackle the challenge to measure, map, and understand the brain. And so I'd like to provide you with a little bit of an overview of how that's been developing, and then I'd like to end by also talking about some of the concrete areas that we've been working with UCI in the International Brain Initiative. So in 2016, 2017, there were several high-level events that took place in the development of the IBI. These were mostly foundation-setting, trust-building activities. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them here that were particular milestones and helped to stimulate the momentum of the International Brain Initiative. One of them was a conference called the Coordinating Global Brain Projects Conference that took place at Rockefeller University. This was hosted by Corey Bargman and Rafa Yuste, and this gathered over 400 attendees from more than a dozen countries. And what they talked about here was what is happening around the world and what would be opportunities for synergy between all of these different efforts. They came out with this paper not long after, which detailed the high priority areas that were mentioned during this conference. One of them, I should say, was neuroethics. I think that this is one of the highest priority items that emerged from that, and so we wanted to get started on this very early. And so that was one of the earliest working groups of the International Brain Initiative. And then the other really monumental meeting that took place was in Australia, and this is where that declaration of intent was made. Since that time, over 2018, a lot of this was focused on the vision and goal development for the IBI. So we met pretty frequently. I know it looks like a lot of meetings. It was, but at the same time, this was really both an exercise in trust building, getting to know each other, and also setting the foundation. So it takes a lot of time to get many different countries on the same page. And to do this in a setting that's really filled with a lot of goodwill was one of the goals. And so that was one of the reasons for a lot of these in-person meetings. It was recognized that that's what it really takes to get people to work together. Some key milestones in this trajectory was that a vision and aspirational goals was drafted in Korea. We also had an organizational structure that was confirmed because the question of, well, how are we going to work together was one of the key questions, especially across different country, across a lot of different borders. And so if you want to learn more about this development and some of these activities, you can visit the International Brain Initiative website. And now what I'll go into is where we're at now. In 2019, there's been a lot of strategic and operational development. So this is better formalizing and putting into practice and operations and processes all of those strategic visions, the strategic vision and goals of the International Brain Initiative. In September of this year, we presented a 5-year strategic plan for the International Brain Initiative. And I think that this has been something that's been in rapid development since September. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the different groups that are involved. And this is a walkthrough of how that strategic plan has evolved. So the high-level vision of the International Brain Initiative is to advance neuroscience research through international collaboration and knowledge sharing. There are 3 mission pieces that were identified. One is identifying common priorities across the initiatives and facilitating the exchange of ideas. So at the core of this, it's really coordination and communication across the initiatives. That's this first piece of the mission. The second piece is building networks and catalyzing collaborations across the initiatives. And this involves many different sectors. And finally, a third part of the mission is to augment the national initiatives with programs and resources that broadly benefit global neuroscience. So this is really the action part of things. How do we actually want to work together? How will we implement projects? And so the core activities here for the first part of the mission is communication and dissemination. And for this latter 2 portions of the mission, it's relationship building, facilitating matches for project funding, as well as encouraging positive developments in science culture. And so this is a big part of what we've been focusing on for the last 2 months. All right, so now going into the initial organizational structure, how is the IBI organized? At the center of the IBI, the core of the IBI are the leaders from each of the initiatives. They talk with each other on a regular basis, about once a month. And then other entities within the structure is the Funders Collective. So this is coming from both the public and private side to help them to better coordinate their activities in the international science realm. And then also the Stakeholders Collective. This is meant to represent the perspectives of the broader science community. It may sound like the IBI is a top-down type of effort, but one of the key points that was raised early on in its development is that it really needs to be coming from the scientific community, that the ideas need to be coming from those who are doing the work themselves and listening to the needs of all of the scientists. And so some of the key areas that were identified include neuroethics, creating an inventory of brain initiatives, data standards and sharing, education and training, tools and technology, communication and outreach. It's interesting that a lot of these areas are overlapping with the strategic pillars of the UCI Brain Initiative. These are the leaders of the IBI Strategy Committee. You'll see folks coming from the US Brain Initiative, Human Brain Project, Japan Brain Minds, all across the different initiatives that have been involved. And so going back to the working groups now, because I think this is a key area where the UCI Brain Initiative can play a continuous role. We have folks coming from the scientific community, people who are willing to champion these efforts and who are willing to help provide a lot of thought leadership on how to bring different initiatives together on projects that they can work on collaboratively. So in neuroethics, we have Karen Rommelfanger and Sung Jin Jong from KBRI, which is the Korea Brain Research Institute in Korea. We have the Inventory of Global Brain Projects that's led by Amy Bernard at the Allen Institute for Brain Science, as well as a colleague of mine at the Kavli Foundation. We have several working groups that are just starting up. This includes education and training, communication and outreach, tool and technology dissemination, and data standards and sharing. I have an asterisk here for all of these latter ones because these are just starting, and so there is an open invitation to help co-create new working groups. We look for champions, people who are willing to provide the broader view of the neuroscience community. And so if you are interested, please do let me know, or feel free to go on the website, send us an email. We do look for people who have a strong interest in these areas. I'm going to talk about one of those working groups because this is an area where UC Irvine played a fantastic role. This is in the Global Inventory of Brain Projects. One of the strong suggestions that we had heard when the IBI was first getting underway was that it would be helpful to know what other projects were doing, what they were funding, who was involved, what the projects were, what the timelines were, what types of animal models they were using. This could help to better spread and disseminate the knowledge of what other initiatives we're doing across the world, and could also potentially support more collaboration among them if they knew what each other were doing. And so this is where this inventory working group came into being. The first meeting of this working group was funded by the National Science Foundation, and following this blue sky scientific thought convening of what an inventory could be and how it could serve the community, there was a second meeting that took place not long after that, that happened here at UC Irvine in partnership with Mike Yassa and several of the scientists who are here. I see Sunil right over there. And this one was called Best Practices in Systems Implementation. So if you were going to start a platform, an inventory platform, how would you do it? What are the best practices in doing it? And so this was a very important workshop, and now that inventory project is at a stage where we're about to launch a beta version of the platform. It's scheduled to launch early 2020. It's a pilot version, so this is using information coming from the US, Human Brain Project, and Japan. It's quite exciting to gather data that's in different languages and then try to put them into a database together. So that's been quite a learning process, but it is scheduled to launch, and so we're planning on having some beta testing on that. So this is another area where we're going to look for thought leadership on what works, what doesn't work, what should be tweaked as we add in more data from other brain initiatives. Oh, the formatting for this one is interesting. I can just explain this to you. I'm going to give you some examples of IBI activities that have happened so far. One of them is science community engagement. As I had mentioned earlier, while the IBI sounds very grandiose and ambitious, the true intent here is to hear from the scientific community about what the challenges and needs are. And so we've been engaging in science community engagement events across different conferences throughout the past couple of years. Other example activities have included policy-related discussions. So as you can imagine, when you have all of these large-scale nationally sponsored brain initiatives coming online, this serves as a really fantastic opportunity to think about how you might be able to move the needle in science and the science enterprise and how things have worked traditionally. And so we collaborated with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an intergovernmental organization that creates policies and recommendations around science and technology. And we helped to develop some principles and recommendations for responsible innovation in neurotechnology. This is very important because as a lot of new tools and technologies are emerging with these large-scale brain initiatives, we also recognize that that advancement is outpacing the dialogue that's happening in the ethical, legal, and societal sectors. And so it's really critical to have frameworks in place, not so much for the purpose of regulation or compliance, but really to help provide a tool for empowerment to the scientific community to make sure that these can continue to progress in concert with societal goals. And so this has been an interesting effort. And then finally, national initiative engagement. Again, the platform of these large-scale initiatives provides the opportunity to collectively think about how to provide the community with tools. So one of those tools is in thinking about neuroethics. And so one of the papers that came out in 2018 is on neuroethics questions to guide ethical research in the international brain initiatives, and by extension, the broader community. What kinds of questions could a scientist be asking themselves at the bench while they're developing their questions for experimental testing? For example, what are the implications of my biological model of disease on stigma, let's say? And so this is a way to help stimulate that dialogue. And again, the perspective here is that neuroethics could be a tool for empowerment within the neuroscience community, not purely looked at as some kind of a regulatory force. And I think this will become more and more important because neuroscience holds a special place, I think, within the science field broadly, because it so inherently deals with things that are intrinsic to our being as humans, things like autonomy, personal responsibility, free will. And so with that, I just want to emphasize, and on behalf of the Kavli Foundation and the International Brain Initiative, I would like to extend my congratulations to the UCI community, to the organizers of the UCI Brain Initiative for this exciting launch event today. I understand that these are the pillars, the strategic pillars of the UCI Brain Initiative. I hope that through my talk today, you've seen that there are many cross-links and connections between the strategic pillars of the UCI Brain Initiative along with the US Brain Initiative as well as the International Brain Initiative. So this is really the way in which neuroscience is headed, is thinking about how can we push the needle even further than where we've been pushing it over the past few decades, since 1964 when the UCI Department of Neurobiology and Behavior was first started. And so with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Caroline. It's really fantastic to hear about the Kavli Foundation's efforts in facilitating and catalyzing all of these international brain initiatives and U.S. brain initiative efforts. Very exciting time, and I hope that that many of the folks here will get energized by this and see that there's tremendous opportunities for us to be able to pursue. I will be your speaker for the rest of this time until the break, and I just want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about the UCI Brain Initiative, because you've heard some about it, but I want to make this very concrete and talk about what exactly it is and what we've done and what we plan to do in the near and down the line in the future as well. So the first thing that I'd like to kind of highlight is why. Why is it that we're doing this at UCI? And you've heard about this a couple times already from our Vice Chancellor for Research and from Dr. Montojo. We have a rich history here, and it started with this gentleman who unfortunately could not be here today. He's had some health issues, so we'll send him our best regards. But Jim was one of the pioneers in the field of neuroscience, of course, and he founded in 1964 the Department of Psychobiology, as it was known at the time, and then later renamed to Neurobiology and Behavior, but truly the first department of neuroscience in the world right here at UC Irvine, even before the campus opened its doors to students. So that's the first reason. We have a legacy to uphold. We have a rich history here. The second reason is we're everywhere. We're not just in one department. We're not just in one center. We're not just in one program. We are literally everywhere. Tons of departments, tons of centers and institutes, and this is not an exhaustive list. If you don't see your center or your department on here, don't give me grief for it. It's a tiny little infarction. I will fix it later today. But the key here is that it's not just about doing wet laboratory research or cognitive neuroscience or imaging. Brain is a very, very rich set of disciplines. It is not something that lives inside one department. It really lives at the intersections of all of these departments and programs. It's with this thinking that a group of us got together and started to think with the administration and think with each other about how we can use this opportunity that we have here at UCI, given the richness, to put together something that really facilitates much more interaction, right? So it's in some ways it's an embarrassment of riches, right? You have tons of strength in neuroscience, but it's scattered. It's throughout the entire campus. How do we bring it all together? So this group of visionary colleagues and I worked together to propose to the campus an academic initiative. And as you can see, I didn't put their affiliations here. I'm trying to kind of reduce how much we use affiliations. They're all related to Brain, but trust me when I say that all of these individuals are really across the campus from many different departments, many different areas, and represent some of the thought leaders that we have on this campus in neuroscience. So we put together this idea, this notion for a UCI Brain initiative that is really requiring the campus to come together, to work together on research, education, community engagement, outreach, and so on. We proposed this to the Provost's office, and at the time, it was Professor Judy Stepan-Norris who was in Professor Stern's position. She was the former Vice Provost for Academic Planning, and she also worked with us to try to come up with a good concept that we can get support for, and it was Professor Enrique Lavernia, our Provost and Vice Chancellor, Executive Vice Chancellor, who approved it. So now we have support to go forward. Now, what does this mean? What does the initiative do? The goals of the initiative there's three key goals. The first one is to support cutting-edge collaborative research, and collaboration is really the key. So people that are within the same department, within the same center, already have a means to collaborate. They already know each other. They're down the hall from each other. That's not what this is about. It's about facilitating new collaborations that would not have been possible otherwise. We also wanted to facilitate the building of innovative interdisciplinary education. One of the things that you heard about from Dean Hayes is that we have tremendous strength in neuroscience education on this campus. We have a phenomenal interdepartmental neuroscience gateway program. It's a one-year gateway program that's been very, very successful. And the question was, how can we take this success and capitalize on it to build a full degree granting program? And that makes us competitive in certain areas, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we've made progress on this. But being able to make this interdisciplinary, in other words, not just locked to specific departments or programs, but really across the whole campus, was a key goal of the initiative. We also wanted to set up a digital information exchange hub. So we wanted to set up a website where everybody can find each other. We've got over 200 neuroscientists or brain scientists on this campus, scattered across all facets of the campus. And sometimes it's a little difficult to find collaborators, to find the right resources, facilities, programs, and just people to talk to about your ideas. So we wanted to build a medium for this to happen. So the first idea, or the first part of the theme, really has to do with research. And we started to think about ways that we can try to streamline the interdisciplinary collaborations under research. So we put together 4 key themes, and you'll see that one of them, actually 3 of them are quite commonly seen in other brain initiatives, and one of them is, I think, quite unique to UCI, and you'll hear a lot more about it later today. The first one is the healthy brain. And the healthy brain is, as you can imagine, related to brain health and disease. So we have tremendous strength, again, on this campus in studying Alzheimer's disease, in studying stroke, in studying epilepsy, in studying a variety of different disorders, but also in studying the state of brain health. How is it that lifestyle modifiable factors like sleep and exercise and so on are able to influence brain health? So this is a very comprehensive theme, and of course, lots of interdisciplinarity. We also have the computational brain. How is it that brains can encode information, store information, use information to guide decision-making? How is it that we can process the incredible amount of sensory flow that comes into the brain? So from a computational perspective, how does the brain accomplish this? But also, how can we use this knowledge to build better technology? So what other kinds of innovations can we develop now that we understand how the brain works? So in terms of thinking about brain-machine interfaces and so on. So again, another very interdisciplinary theme, obviously brings in computer science, cognitive science, and neuroscience, and many other facets. We also have the social brain. This, I think, is a very, very exciting facet of the initiative, thinking about the basis for social behavior, for collaboration, for cultural change, for peace, prosperity, even things like war and racism, trying to understand the neural basis of those kinds of social phenomena and use that for the betterment of humanity became also a central goal. And then finally, the artistic brain. This is one that is really near and dear to my heart, and took a lot of time and effort to try to figure out what it will mean. And you'll hear from Dean Barker, hopefully later today, about what the artistic brain means to our School of the Arts here at UCI as well. This was viewed as part of the initiative that really facilitated collaboration between the School of the Arts and the other schools related to the interface of arts and neuroscience. And this is a relationship that goes both ways. So using the arts as a way to fundamentally understand the brain, and also using neuroscience to fundamentally understand the arts. The basis for aesthetic creativity, things that we've done some work on acting, we've done some work also on media and design. You'll hear about work in music and dance. All of these things engage the brain in different ways, and by understanding those brain processes, maybe even being able to track them live and dynamically, we can start to change the creative aspect of what we do as well. So these are not intended to be limiting in any way, and of course there's lots and lots of intermixing in between. These are cross-cutting themes, they're intended to be that, so the thought should not be, can I place my research neatly under one of these umbrellas or the others? And what you'll find is that research typically flows into multiple of these themes, but they're just helpful ways to kind of organize, especially conferences and meetings and things of the sort. So that's on the research side, and I'll come back to what we're doing to support this in just a few. But I want to tell you what we've been busy over the last year working on, which is really on the educational side, and Dean Hayes mentioned this a little bit. We talked about our INP program, the Interdepartmental Neuroscience Gateway program, and the need to really make this into a full degree granting program. And that obviously comes with some challenges, comes with lots and lots of discussions to make sure that we can take everything that is strong and exceptional about what we currently have and only serve to amplify it, and we don't risk losing any of the good stuff that we already have. But I'm delighted to say that there's a group of people who have come together to try to put together a proposal for an interdisciplinary neuroscience graduate program. It's still a work in progress. There's lots of organizing faculty that are working on this, lots of faculty that are involved already with the INP program, but lots of additional faculty from other schools who had not been involved before, and now we're thinking about how to make this much more interdisciplinary. This is by no means a work that is accomplished. It is very much in progress, and we're continuing to make progress and hoping that sometime in the year 2020 we'll be able to propose this to the graduate division. The next thing that we spent a lot of time doing is building this digital resource hub. This was a very, very important goal. We wanted to make sure that there was a place for neuroscientists on campus to find each other, for things to be listed, for events to be listed and tracked. So we put together a website resource that covers latest research that is coming from our faculty and our students on campus. Also has an overview of all of the different departments, units, centers, core facilities, you name it, all of the entities that really serve brain-related research and education on campus. Also, a summary of the different training programs. It was mentioned before, we don't just have one neuroscience training program, we have 6. So it can be a little confusing, so information about that. And of course, we're amplifying and building on these things as time goes on. We also have what's been very successful, a jobs listing. And I've heard from lots of people that they've actually used this to figure out what jobs are available at all levels, faculty, staff, students, postdocs, you name it. If people are looking for people to fill positions in their laboratories or departments are hiring, they reach out to us or they fill out a little online summary, and then we port that information over to the website. We also keep track of upcoming events, and we blast them out to a large mailing list that I think at this point probably has most neuroscientists on campus. If you're not on the mailing list, please feel free to subscribe and get on the mailing list, because you will get lots of exciting information about upcoming events and so on. And then finally, something called Dimensions. And I'm not going to tell you too much about Dimensions now. I'll give you a very, very brief overview because I want you to hear about it from Dr. Melinda Gormley, who will talk about it a little bit more later today. But Dimensions is actually a commercial platform that the UCI Brain Initiative invested in, so we have a partnership with them to use their platform to provide an avenue, and this is secured access on UCI, to provide an avenue for UCI investigators and students to be able to find papers, patents, policy documents, publication citation metrics, funding trends over time, different funding opportunities. You can look at different topics and whether they've been funded extensively by one institute versus another and what those trends look like. It can be an extremely helpful resource if you're trying to build an interdisciplinary research program or identify potential collaborators that maybe just right in your backyard but you have not talked to before. So this is a very, very exciting resource. We're just launching it now, and we will have lots of training around it as well. But my colleague, Dr. Gormley, will tell you a little bit more about it later today. And she will also spend some time by the UCI Brain booth outside, offering to demo it to people, so you can come and check it out. You can come look yourself up if you like, and see what the program says about you, and then tell us how horribly wrong it is because it didn't capture this one paper you wrote in 1976. Inside joke. Finally, one of the most important things that we can do as an initiative is put our money where our mouth is. So the initiative did come with funding and support from the Office of Academic Planning, and we want to turn right around and offer some of those resources to the UCI community through pilot grants. So these seed grants will offer up to $25,000 grants to interdisciplinary teams that are conducting early stage research. So you have to think about this in a particular way. Because if it's research that normally would get funded if you just submitted it to NSF or NIH, that's not going to be as competitive for this. We want things that are still high risk, very early, proof of concept. You don't have a lot of pilot data, but you've got a really cool idea. And the things that are going to make for winning proposals here are where you cross disciplines, when you're working with colleagues and partners that are not in your school, not in your department, but really outside. And it doesn't just have to be pairs of individuals, it could be large groups as well. And if groups, obviously we're going to get a number of people applying for this, and we're only going to have limited funds, but even the grants, even the proposals that don't get funded through this mechanism, will still have our support for research development. So we will still work with you on your application, try to identify other opportunities for you, maybe through foundation support, maybe through private philanthropy and so on, to make sure that every good idea on this campus related to brain research and brain science does not go to waste. We have many more activities, just a sampling of this. We also amplify your communications message. So where's Diana? Diana's somewhere. Diana Laughlin is our communications officer for the initiative, and she has built the brain.uci.edu website, and she's built several other websites and worked in the Provost office previously to coming to work for the initiative. But she is terrific at building websites, print materials, really amplifying messages that come from existing centers. One example, Dr. Barham's Epilepsy Research Center, for example, just got a fresh new website that Diana worked on, and we're happy to provide this service to any center, any facility. The Campus Center on Neuroimaging just got a brand new brochure that she made. So we're happy to provide that level of service and support to departments, to units, to training programs that need an outward-facing message and some materials to be able to take to conferences or to booths or to spread the word about their activities. That's something that we're happy to provide. We do provide full research development support also, going all the way up to the Provost's office. And if there is any team that wants to put together an interdisciplinary project related to brain science, we will do everything that we can to support you, all the way from reviewing aims, identifying opportunities, even helping with the writing. We're happy to do that. We also have a lot of activities in community outreach and education. So a lot of our students are going out in the community constantly and educating about brain science and using this really as a vehicle to help with STEM education, STEAM education. I have to remember to always include the A. That's for you too, Steve. We have a big social media presence, and it's continuously growing, and we're happy to also work with different entities on their social media platforms and alumni engagement as well. And we also have been working very closely with the Team Science Acceleration Lab with Dan Stokels in the audience and Maritza Salazar and Gary and Judy Olson. They are a terrific resource on this campus. I can't possibly tell you how incredible they have been with their support and their time. They've helped the initiative really get off the ground and embody the principles of team science, and we're trying to also take any teams that we support and advise them to go directly to TSAL to work with Dan and his team to make sure they're getting the right support, to figure out how team science should be done. And I'll give you a hint. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's not just let's get a team together and work. There's a lot of challenges that come with that, and being educated on the challenges I think is very important. You can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter. So Brain Circuit is our newsletter. Many of you who are on the mailing list have been receiving this already. And usually it's pretty extensive. It summarizes all of the upcoming talks, current job listings, any news, any media kinds of attention for the work that our faculty and students have been doing. This is also a tremendous resource, and feel free, if you're not on the list, to sign up to receive this. And if you have events and things that are coming up and you want to tell us about it, there's a place on the website where you can submit your event also, and we will directly put it into our database. So at the end of this, I just want to ask you to tell us how we can help you. Our job is to make your jobs easier. We're very, very dedicated, especially to graduate and undergraduate education in neuroscience. So students, don't be shy. Reach out to any of the team members about anything that you're working on. Certainly, like Dean Hayes said before, if you're working on something exciting, tell us about it, and we will do our best to amplify what you're doing, try to get you some media attention for it, and certainly work with you on the research development aspects of this as well. So the team is delighted to work with the campus in the coming year. And maybe years down the line. And I actually think that we have maybe about 10 minutes or so. I know that the initiative has generated a lot of excitement, but also a lot of questions. I do have a few minutes to take questions if there are questions, but I also want to thank you for your time, and maybe we'll break early if there aren't a lot of questions. Thank you.